It's time for the Daly Planet podcast show. So sit back, relax, and give us a go. Scott and Matt and maybe a guest have undertaken an epic pod quest. We're gonna ramble on about the movies and books and television and directors and film festivals and this really long list of stuff that I know nothing about, but they gave it to me and they really wanted me to read through it. And that's all I can really say about it, but it's gonna be great. Okay, start the show.
Hello and welcome to the Daly Planet podcast, your weekly podcast for all things movies, TV, books, and anything else we feel like talking about. My name is Scott Daly, and I am your host, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Michael Grubb. Michael, how's it going?
Oh, pretty good there, Scott. Pretty good. Not a lot of good movies out this month, though.
No. See, it's August now, so you and I were sitting down trying to figure, what are we going to talk about this month? And there's not a lot. We could have talked about Dark Tower, but you didn't see that, so we couldn't do that.
From what I hear, didn't miss much.
You did not. I really wanted to have a podcast all about that movie, but it would be 5 minutes long because there's just not a lot to talk about.
Yeah, not much to say. It's the type of Hollywood movie I imagine. This is something I was going to bring up later in the context of what we were going to talk about, but to me, there's like two kind of reasons movies fail. And in terms of like Hollywood movies, I feel like it's usually like, even if sometimes the plot is like properly, like the beats are like properly structured, but it's just like the movie doesn't do anything interesting. And then with independent movies, the reasons that I feel they fail are usually more like it does a lot of interesting things, but the movie like doesn't come together. It like doesn't seem to hit all the right beats. And I imagine Dark Tower failed in both of those aspects.
Yes, it did. It failed in just about every aspect. It's like, I think I described it to you as like a really shitty Last Action Hero, which is actually like crazily accurate, because that's like, it has the little boy character going into a different world and then bringing that guy back with him, and there's all these funny fish out of water jokes when he's eating a hot dog and says, "What kind of dog is it made out of?" And it's just like, it fails to capture every good thing about the book series. And it compresses it all down and then removes all the interesting parts of it. The only good part of the movie is Idris Elba was perfect as Roland. And that almost makes it worse because like this was probably our one shot for this, although one of the news items I'm going to be talking about here in a few minutes says otherwise. But
so why do you think it failed? I mean, is it because the director just like didn't have a good vision for what the Dark Tower was and why it was good, or is it like one of those instances where they reshot stuff because the studio tried to make it appeal to more people than it should have?
Yeah, it feels like a movie that was completely ripped apart by studio interference. It feels like you can see, like, first of all, you can see like the little boy character Jake goes through puberty during filming, and you can see where they had to do pickups and reshoots because he looks different and his voice is lower. You could notice, like, very clearly notice that kind of stuff. So they definitely did a lot of reshoots. It feels like a studio coming in and saying, no, we can't do this, we have to do this and push these things. Like, there's all these little moments where they like point to something that's another Stephen King universe. Like, you see a carnival with Pennywise written on it from It, and you see the house from The Shining, and I mean, they use like the psychic power that Jake has is called the Shine, which I don't think they emphasized. I mean, there was people with psychic powers in the books, but I don't think they emphasized that connection as much as obviously. But it just like it was trying so much to compile all this mythology into this 85-minute movie, this short movie, that just like, it ended just being like a mediocre action flick, and it's really disappointing.
That's too bad.
But that's literally the most we can talk about Dark Tower, because that's it.
Yeah. It seems like a lot of movies have been ruined from studio interference recently. Yeah. Well, is that something that's always happened, or is it just because we know about it more now because all this crap goes online?
I think it's probably, I think it's always happened on some level, but I do think, yes, we are aware of the process way more than we ever have been before with Twitter and with everyone's online and stories are leaking all the time about production troubles. Like Dark Tower itself was a movie that was plagued by production issues. Like throughout it, they had to start and stop and get new scripts. Like I think it has 4 credited writers on the thing, which is never a good sign. And they did some early test screenings, which came out awful. And studios place a lot of reliance on test screenings when from everything I read, test screenings are stupid because the type of people that are going to go to test screenings are just going to shit talk your movie because they can, because it makes them feel important.
Right.
But
that makes sense.
Yeah. But it's just, I think it's always gone on to some level. I think there's so much more money in it now that studios are more involved than ever. And I think this is actually a pretty good segue for us though, because the movies that we're going to be talking about today are movies that I don't think would ever have been made without the assistance of Netflix. These are smaller movies. Some of them are a little bit bigger in budget, but I don't think they're movies that a studio would have ever thought we can make enough money on this to do it big in the theaters. So basically what we're doing this week, since we've been talking for like 8 minutes and haven't gotten around to it, is we couldn't find anything fun to talk about. You and I both realized that we had been watching a lot of the Netflix original movies lately, because Netflix is on top of all the TV series they're doing, which I think they release like 1 series a week now. It's getting ridiculous, but
really, I hadn't realized.
Yeah. I mean, last week, What Hot American Summer came out. This week was a 8-episode show about an autistic kid, which actually is pretty great. Next week is the new Marvel, The Defenders is coming out. So yeah, it's just like at least 1 a week. And then they also have comedy stand-ups coming constantly. And then they have movies, which their movies are interesting because they're spending a lot of money on them, but they kind of just throw them on the site and they don't promote them very much. They like, yeah. Like they don't, it's very interesting because they spend so much money. Like these 3 movies we're talking about this week are I Don't Feel at Home in This World Anymore, To the Bone, and Okja. 2 of these I think were made in Netflix from the beginning. I think Okja was purchased by Netflix after appearing at a festival. Well, I'm not sure on that actually.
Yeah. And like I don't Feel at Home in This World Anymore came out apparently like 5 months ago or something, and I didn't even know it had come out. Yeah,
it premiered at Sundance. Netflix bought it. I think this is what happened. Yeah, it premiered at Sundance. Netflix bought it, and then Netflix like threw it on their streaming platform a week later, which is kind of crazy because like for people like me that don't get to go to Sundance but follow it crazily, like I see all these movies that appear at Sundance and I like write them down. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get to see this in like 8 months or a year, if ever. But Netflix just threw that movie out there like immediately.
Yeah, it's crazy how fast that release cycle is now. I saw that the new Ghost in the Shell movie is already on Netflix.
Oh, it is? Wow.
Yeah, even though it was like just in theaters last month. But it was terrible enough. They're like, well, we might as well sell this to Netflix while someone will pay any money for it.
Yeah, so I think what we wanted to talk about today is just talk about these movies, because I think these are very interesting movies, and I think you have some points in that there are parts of them that they have very standard indie film problems, but they're also a type of movie that you don't get to see in theaters anymore.
Right. And I always enjoy watching these types of movies. When I lived in a proper city, I'd go to the independent movie theater pretty often. And normally what would happen is just what I was describing earlier, where I would enjoy a lot of things in the movies that I thought were like creative storytelling devices or interesting ideas, but I rarely felt they really came together in a way that worked, which isn't like a super harsh criticism of the movie. Like I think it's still worth making these movies, but it's a fun learning opportunity to discuss them and figure out like why exactly it didn't feel like they were satisfying movies ultimately.
Yeah, and I think we're going to have some differing opinions on each of them. I think, as per usual, I like some of these movies a little more than you do. But let's jump into it. Let's go to our first movie, which was the one we've already kind of mentioned. I Don't Feel at Home in This World Anymore. This is a movie written and directed by Macon Blair. And I think one of the things we're going to see is in common with all 3 of these movies is that these are probably great examples of the auteur theory, because These are both written and all three of these movies that we're talking about are both written and directed by the same person. So it's very much that individual's image and that person's idea that they are then getting to bring to the screen. So another way that Netflix is helping filmmakers. But anyway, Michael, let's talk about this movie. Let's talk about I Don't Feel at Home in This World Anymore. Besides this really tough title, which I keep forgetting, like every time I try to Google the movie to bring up IMDb, I'm like, something world anymore, something.
Right. Yeah, I get it confused with the Woody Guthrie song, I Ain't Got No Home in This World Anymore, which
yeah.
I thought was where they got the title from, but it's actually another song.
Yeah,
it's
that they
actually
play
called
at the
I
end of
Don't
the
Feel
movie.
at Home in This World Anymore.
Yeah.
So, it is confusing.
Yeah. So this movie stars Melanie Linsky and Elijah Wood as two very frustrated suburbanites, I guess you'd call them, that are just flat out tired of people treating each other like shit. And then Melanie Linsky's character Ruth gets robbed, and that's like her final moment where she says, I can't take this anymore, and she's going to go out there and try to fix the world in her way. And it's a kind of a thriller, kind of a comedy. It gets really violent and dark at the end. So what did you think of this movie?
I thought it had a lot of interesting parts. I was kind of interested at the beginning when they kind of showed really well all of the sort of frustrating, like slightly bad people things that happened to her, like when she was like at the grocery store and like someone knocked something off the shelf and she picked it up and they didn't care, and like someone cut in front of her in line and stuff like that. And they really quickly and effectively like show you who this character is and what she's struggling with. But I felt like in the middle, like shortly after this, even after she gets robbed, you start to get a little bit bored because everything is pretty low stakes on purpose.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
Like, cause I think maybe the critical flaw with this movie, in my opinion, is, although like having kind of the like purposelessness of life / like everyone's kind of a piece of crap looking after themselves kind of thing as a theme, and the ending really is, I don't know the right way to end that movie, I guess, and I don't think the ending to this movie was so related to that.
Yeah, so I think we're going to try, and we might change our mind as we go along, but I think we're going to try to not spoiler these because they're movies that maybe a lot of our listeners haven't seen. So yeah. let's not jump into the details of the ending. But my thoughts on this movie are, and it feels pretentious and stupid to say, but I think this movie has second act problems. I think it had a really good setup and an idea of how to end it, and then it just kind of meanders in the middle to get there. It doesn't really know what it's doing. Like she just kind of, it's almost a comedy of errors as she just like bounces from person to person, trying to track down these people that robbed her. And she just keeps getting in these terrible situations where she's getting screwed over by terrible people, but is also kind of being generally awful. Like she freaking nails the guy in the face with the box of silverware. And it just, I think you're right that the middle just really does sag. And as much as I love the performances, I think we'll get into both of them a little bit later, but yeah, like it feels like the movie knew where it wanted to end up and then didn't really know how to get there in a compact, convincing, like really flow of a way.
Right. Like none of the things in the middle, even though like most of it is her getting back various pieces of the things she stole, or like figuring out who stole them and like confronting them, in quotes. Like she doesn't even know why she's confronting them, and neither does the audience, which is kind of like was done on purpose because that's the character. But when you're watching it, it's like, well, I don't know why she's doing this, and just as expected, neither does she. And then she leaves, and some stuff happens. Yeah.
And I think you're absolutely right, and I think that's part of the concept of it, is just that she's going out there and kind of flailing wildly, attempting to fix all these things, and isn't succeeding. and is just kind of aimlessly moving around, and no one's helping her. She gets Elijah Wood to help her, and Elijah Wood's Tony character is absolutely hilarious. Like this nunchuck ninja star wielding guy who is like just as sick and tired of things as she is, and kind of goes a little over the top and crazy with some of it, but it has this like undercurrent of just like being a really decent person under all of it, under all of his like crazy kookiness. Like he's wonderful. So she finds this guy, and they work together to kind of track down all the stuff, and she's kind of forcing him to come along because she wants backup. But yeah, I mean, it just the main. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, I also really liked his character, but I would kind of disagree with you about that he's like her and like tired of the world, because I didn't really see that with him. I felt like he was more at peace with the world. Like she kind of went to him, and he kind of like, you know, he was kind of awkward at the beginning, but then he just kind of like confidently helps her do things in a sort of. I
just mean like when she tells him that she got robbed, and he kind of like flips out and like scares the shit out of her because he gets so angry. Like he just like gets like ridiculously hilariously angry like that, and she like runs away because she's terrified of him.
I think there's differences in their response to that, to bad things though, because she's just like tired of the world and bad people in it, and he's more takes an active role in like this. It's almost like he's glad that there's bad things happening in the world so that he has something important to do.
Yeah, I think
he goes to help her.
Yeah, because he thinks he's good at martial arts,
right?
And
he really enjoys every minute of their adventures.
Yeah,
whereas she is more like frustrated that all these things have happened, and
that's true. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that the general problem with it, and you're absolutely right, is that because it's this movie that's it's almost about how nothing matters. And
right.
So therefore the movie doesn't matter. I mean, without spoiling it, I think it gets to a place at the end where our character has, I don't want to say growth, but a realization of sorts. So I think we get there. Yeah. I think she has an arc, and I think Elijah Wood has an arc.
The realization is more just like, everything sucks. Don't worry about it so much, which isn't a very pleasing resolution to a movie.
No,
where you're kind of like you're kind of hoping she finds some deeper purpose to things.
But also, I mean, that might maybe not pleasing and not like fulfilling, but kind of accurate to the real world. I mean, like her whole mission, I think she says this directly to someone when someone asks her what she's doing or what she wants. I think she says frustratingly, I just want people to stop being assholes to each other. And that's just not a thing that's ever going to happen. And it doesn't, like, she can get back all her stuff and she can punish the guys that stole it from her, but that's not going to change anything. That's not going to change anyone. Everyone's going to keep being assholes to each other. And I think the movie finishes with her, at least growing to understand that and get to a point of acceptance. It's not great. Like, it's not going to make you feel warm and fuzzy inside. But I don't know. I enjoyed it.
I get that it's intentional and realistic, but I kind of think that making too realistic of movies in terms of like, message and like hopelessness almost like never works. Like, it just, like, a movie that comes to mind is what's the one with all of the drugs and Jared Leto? Can't think of right now.
Well, there's been lots
Requiem
of
for
Requiem. Okay, yeah. Darren Aronofsky's Requiem for a Dream.
Like, it's just a like dire, like hopeless movie all the way through, and then that's how it ends. And there's a lot of movies that are kind of like that. And I'm always just like, I wish I didn't watch this movie.
Well, but I don't know. Like, I think I agree with you on Requiem, but I think that's the strength of the movie because it just dives into drugs and what they can and will do to people. But in this movie, I think, yes, like, there's no problem solved. But I think our main character gets to a point where she might not have achieved her original objective, but she has at least come to some sort of understanding and some sort of personal contentment.
Yeah, which I don't feel was entirely earned. But like another, like at least with Requiem for a Dream, like it's really, really bad things that are happening. Like the stakes are kind of high. Like everything that happens, you're just like, oh God, this is awful. In this movie, like the stakes are always low, and you're generally like, oh, this isn't that big of a deal.
I mean, the third act of the movie, it's literally life and death.
It escalates quickly, but it doesn't feel like it's like come about as a result of, you know, anything of consequence, unless you kind of buy into the tiger lawn ornament theory of that, which was used well. But yeah, anyway, I just didn't feel like it was an earned ending that was tied into the early part.
I mean, I don't agree with you, but we can't explore the ending in a lot of detail without completely spoiling everything. But I do think that, you know, it's just a movie that escalates in such fun ways. Like we were talking about the movies like this. We kind of like these dark black comedies with violence in them, and like I think we said that In Bruges was like the best example of that, where it's just like, and that's a much better movie than this, absolutely. But the kind of crazy escalation and ridiculous violence that happens to where it's almost funny, I think works really well here. I think you mentioned when Elijah Wood walks into the room and then throws the ninja star into the wall, and then like,
that's a great moment. And then like, throws like a firecracker thing on the floor.
Yeah, and he has a fucking morning star. Like he's not like he's like, and it's just so random and weird and funny. And then he like has to take the time at the end to like yank the ninja star back out of the wall to take it with him, and he's like struggling with it.
It's just how hard I throw.
Yeah, it's just like I think it's a really funny movie.
I really like Elijah Wood. He could have been used more.
Yeah,
potentially.
I just like I know this is not the best movie, but I enjoy, like, for a movie that's going to appear on Netflix and not be pushed by them. I really enjoyed it.
I'm glad I watched it.
And Melanie Linsky, like, I love her. She normally plays like, I don't think she's ever been like a lead, like she's centered a movie. Like she was in that HBO show Togetherness, and she was the wife of the main character, and I thought she was wonderful in that. And she's been smaller roles and everything. This was her first real starring leading role, and I thought she did wonderful. Like I thought she just hit this perfect level of like just like indifference and depression, while still also like having enough energy and anger to like play both sides of that.
It was actually a pretty difficult role, I think. Although she made it seem really easy, but like right away, part of it is like the writing and the setup of the scenes, but right away, like just kind of through her reactions to the things that happen in the little scenes where people are taking advantage of her, show exactly who she is, because different people would react differently to these situations. Yeah,
and it's you're absolutely right, and I think a lot of that credit does go to Macon Blair, the director, because we talked about how the first 5 minutes of the film almost like perfectly set everything up, and they really do, because the opening scene where she's a nurse and the woman dies saying something terribly racist, and then and then she's out in the hall with them, and the son of the woman says, did she have any last words? And then the doctor just like looks and turns and looks at Ruth, Melanie Linsky's character, and then they just like make him holds it for just a beat too long, where like no one's talking, and then like holds it for a beat and then cuts away, and it's just this perfect funny moment that also completely establishes like just what her day-to-day life is. It's really well done.
I had really high expectations after the first 3 minutes, I would say, because everything was extremely purposeful. And enjoyable. And then like about when she has her little conversation with her sister or whatever at her sister's house, you start getting bored, and it seems like everything that's being said isn't so important anymore. Like you've already kind of gotten the point, and you can begin the plot now.
Okay. So I guess unless you had anything else to say about this, I liked. One more thing I'll say is Gary Anthony Williams as the detective. I thought was wonderful. I thought he was really great. His whole rant when she goes to him complaining about, I have the address of the guy, and he goes off. I forget exactly what he says, but he's talking about how many people are dead and how much stuff they're cleaning up right now, and they don't have time for this. It was really good.
Yeah, it was good. All
right, so let's move on from this really long titled movie, and let's talk about To the Bone. This is another movie I think you and I are going to pretty vehemently disagree on because we had a whole conversation about it beforehand. But this movie was written and directed by Marty Noxon, who you may not know, but our listeners might know as a writer and showrunner on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. She took over for Joss Whedon in season 6, I think, when he had 3 shows running at the same time.
I feel like you might have a conflict of interest here, because I know you love that show.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing is a lot of people don't like season 6 of Buffy, and they blame Marty Noxon for it because she took over. So her Twitter profile right now says, "I ruined Buffy and I'll ruin you too." So
well, that's good.
Yeah,
she owns that. I respect her.
Yeah, and I think she's a really, really gifted writer. So I actually heard about this movie long before it came out, and I think me and my wife watched it the second it came out because we were really into it. So To the Bone is about. I can read the IMDb summary right here if that works. It's short, so I'll read it.
Go for it.
A young woman is dealing with anorexia. She meets an unconventional doctor who challenges her to face her condition and embrace life. It's not really a great summary, actually. It's very vague.
No, and it's not really as much about Keanu Reeves' character as it makes you believe from that description.
No, I think that's probably designed to push his character since he's one of the biggest names in this.
That's true. He is.
But he's not. He's not in the movie very much.
Brilliant man.
But the movie stars Lily Collins as Ellen, who is the girl suffering from anorexia. Lily Collins, of course, Phil Collins' daughter. I think daughter.
Well, interesting.
Lily Collins, who herself had an eating disorder, as did Marty Noxon, the writer-director. So this was supposed to be a very truthful and accurate depiction of the disease and the recovery process.
Was this filmed during her eating disorder, or did they CG all of her skeleton?
No, she actually lost a lot of weight to play the role. Of course, that is very dangerous when you're a person that has an eating disorder, but she worked with a doctor and was very careful with it, and did it as carefully and healthily as possible. So I think there are parts of it, I think when you see her in some points that there's a little CG work there, but no, Lily Collins lost a lot of weight to play this.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, you can tell.
So yeah, the basic plot of this, outside of what that description was, is that Lily Collins is playing a woman suffering from the disease. She hasn't had any luck. She kind of doesn't even care. She doesn't seem like she really wants to get better. Her family forces her into a treatment house run by Keanu Reeves' character, who we barely see. He sends her to the house, but then I think we see him 3 more times in the movie, and then he's gone. But basically, she's surrounded by all these other characters who are also going through eating disorders. I think it's very cool that the movie, first of all, doesn't shy away from all this stuff because it has a star and a writer and director that have gone through this. But we see the different kind of disorders because there's some people in there with bulimia. There's some people in there with anorexia. There's a guy in the house, which is something that people don't think about very often. They don't think about men having eating disorders, but they do. That is something that absolutely does happen. So the movie strives for realism in a lot of the stuff as much as it can. I can't talk about how well it succeeds in that because I have never experienced these disorders, so I don't know. But I would assume that with a writer and director that went through it herself, that she achieved that. So what did you think about the movie, Michael?
I think most of my issues with the movie, again, kind of fall into the ending, and that I felt it. Maybe I felt that she didn't have an arc that was self-consistent. It's actually kind of hard to talk about without talking about how the movie ends, but yeah, I don't know. What did you think about it?
So I really liked it. I think out of I don't. Out of these three movies, this might be my favorite. I thought Lily Collins' character was very, very interesting to me. I really thought her performance was incredible. I don't think the movie's perfect. I do think, and we might get into this more later, but her relationship with the other guy in the house, how they eventually start to form kind of a romantic relationship, and it's definitely not a healthy one. I think the movie zooms in on that particular relationship too much and loses some of the bigger picture stuff. Stop talking about her disorder itself and more focus on their relationship.
I hate it when movies throw in a romantic bit, like not even just for no reason, but in a way that like detracts from the actual thing the movie's about and like confuses the like motivations a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Like, it seems like sometimes the movie is giving this like her relationship with this guy character like too much credit, even though my reaction is the same as yours, that it's a like really unhealthy relationship that kind of makes me feel sick.
Yeah, so this guy is played by Alex Sharp. He's a character named Luke, who is a ballet dancer with a bum knee. His knee got injured, and I guess I don't know if it makes clear if he develops the disorder after his knee got hurt or if he's just had the disorder and then the knee like sent him spiraling. I don't know. I'm not sure. Alex Sharp's a very, very well-known Broadway actor. I don't know what other films he's been into before this. Maybe not very many, but this is one of his big film debuts, I think. But I think he does a good job in the role. But yeah, the character is very much, comes into the house as the guy that's almost seems like he's in recovery, whereas everyone else is struggling and not really making a lot of progress. So he's kind of takes over as like, I'm going to help you guys. I'm going to fix you.
Are you familiar with the concept of the manic pixie dream girl in fiction?
Yes.
He's kind of the manic pixie dream guy.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You are. Yeah. You are absolutely correct. And he
appears and he's like a little bit awkward, but like charmingly so. And he like seems to have it all together, and he's like helping the other girls and like seems to know exactly what the main character Ellen needs. But you never get to see him struggle. Like you're told he's had an eating disorder, but he doesn't show any signs of that in this movie. He eats all of his meals and helps other people eat theirs. So it was kind of a lost opportunity of a character, really.
See, I don't agree with that, because I mean, he might not have been outwardly showing, but I think he was in a place at that point of the movie where he was on the road to recovery and was doing much better. But that does not mean that he could not have relapsed. I think the movie tried to show people at different stages of the disorder. There's someone who was connected to a feeding tube because they refused to eat. There's someone who was pregnant, like miraculously got pregnant, and is trying to get well because she wants to have her baby. There's a woman. There's a woman.
Someone's storing vomit under her bed.
Yeah.
But all of these characters are failing. Like all of these characters are in the process of struggling with their disorder.
Yeah, and I think
he's actually the only one who never does in the movie. You're just told that he used to have a eating disorder.
Yeah, but I mean, you see, I don't want to spoil too much of the movie, but he hits a point where something is revealed to him and he can't deal with it. And you see him specifically in that moment reach out to the main character for help, because
when he can't deal with it, he doesn't like revert back to.
Well, we don't know that for sure.
Sort of. Well, yeah, because we abandoned the character at that point.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not his story. So I mean, I think to me, if I'm looking at
it's not his story, but he was made to be like a pretty probably the second most important character.
But when I look at his character, I see him as an example of an illusionary recovery for Lily Collins' character. Like, he seems like he's better. He seems like he has everything together. But actually underneath it all, he's in terrible shape. He's lying to himself.
That's the part that I didn't get from the movie. Like, I can, if you tell me that, I can buy it. But during the movie, I didn't feel like that was ever shown to me. It felt more like it was being shown that like this is what it looks like to recover. It was more like the point is you can get over this. Just look at this guy. Look how well he's doing now. Look how positive and cheery and happy he is. And then sure, like, you know, later he gets some bad news, but you're not really, the movie doesn't show you that like that destroys him permanently. He's just like has a rough day is as far as I felt it goes.
Yeah, but I mean, I think with a disorder like this, a rough day is always possible. There's always the chance that you're going to have a rough day and it's going to set you back and you're going to relapse and you're going to fall down again and spiral into a point where Ellen is at the beginning of this movie.
Yeah, well, that would have been a fun thing to explore, and maybe would have made both of their characters deeper if maybe he'd gotten his bad news earlier in the movie and then like actually regressed. But I think then she felt like, oh, now I need to help him, and then her kind of helping him and like seeing him being like, why are you doing this? This makes no sense. And then she could realize for herself, like, oh, why am I doing this? This makes no sense.
Yeah, but I don't think Ellen's in a place to do that at all.
But she, by the end of the movie, this really isn't a spoiler, but she kind of the thing at the end of the movie that is like the, I guess, climax or like key moment of the movie is when she kind of like realizes what she's doing to herself. And that could have come about in a number of different ways. And I guess I feel like the way it ended up coming about was unrelated to the other stuff that was happening in the movie, because her relationship with this guy, first, I think probably should have not been a focus at all. But if they were going to make it a focus, they could have done something like that so that both characters learn something from each other. Whereas really, Luke is kind of like a red herring for her in this movie.
I mean, like, yeah, yes.
Yeah, you see what I'm saying with that?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I feel that when he reveals the bad news to her and like basically like reaches out to her and like begs her to help him, is this moment where you realize that everything that he's been putting forward is a facade, that it's not real, that this is not, he's not really this ultra confident, I've beaten my disorder, I'm going to be great and everything's going to be perfect. It's just a facade, and he's just as fucked up as the rest of them. But his moment is completely unrelated to his disorder. Like, I didn't feel like it had anything to do with his struggles with his disorder, which is why I felt it was so out of place. But you attach something when you're trying to get over something like this, you attach meaning to it. So he has a busted knee and he thinks, I'm going to get back in ballet. I'm going to get back to my life, and I need to beat this disorder because I'm going to get there. Just like the pregnant woman was like, I need to do this. I need to get better because my baby is going to die if I don't do that. So you give yourself meaning and purpose. You give yourself something to live for, and it allows you to get out of this disorder. And we see these things taken away from these characters and what it does to them. And I think Ellen's character is kind of in the same way, where she has her sister like begging her, like saying like, look, like you're destroying me. I want my sister. Like, our relationship is destroyed because of this. And it just seemingly nothing is enough for her. So I think the movie is her coming to a realization, coming to a point where she finally finds something that's worth living for and starts down her road to recovery.
What is the thing that she finds that's worth living for is kind of the thing that I didn't get, which made it unsatisfying.
I mean, I think she has that moment with her mother. I think the movie kind of is setting up her family life issue is a mess and might have been one of the triggering points for this disorder for her, because her mother came out as gay when she was very young and ran off and basically just abandoned her. And her father I don't think we ever see her father in the movie. I don't think he's there at all. Like, she interacts with her stepmother a lot, and then we see her mother and her mother's wife, but her father's not out. So I think this moment of connection and honest to goodness, like connecting with her mother near the end of the movie is the impetus for that kind of change in her. But
yeah, it's just like one moment with her mother though, like that her mother made like one other appearance in the movie. and then has the scene at the end. And really, like, it seemed like she was the least important family member. Like, it seemed more like she had a genuine connection to her sister, and also her stepmom, who you got this idea, like, was a little bit clueless about, like, how to behave around Ellen, but genuinely cared about her and, like, wanted the best for her.
Yeah, but she couldn't see that. And I think that the movie allows that relationship to mend near the end, which I think is very nice.
Does it? It doesn't. Nothing really happens with that. It's just that basically, like, she gives her a ride or something.
I mean,
right?
she doesn't die, and then she goes to see them, and like.
But you don't see that reunion really. They hug or something.
I mean, but that's visual shorthand for our relationship is mending. How else do you show that? Do you have them say our relationship is mending?
The whole moment of realization was after a fairly long private conversation with her mother and series of actions involving that.
Yeah, well, there are hundreds of people in your life that all care about you, and you can.
Sure, but from a storytelling perspective, like, why use the mother there when she's the least set up of all of the other characters who were more important in the story and also important in her life?
Because her mother was the impetus. Her mother leaving was the thing that triggered every bad part of her life. Her mother picked up, abandoned her, and like she is coming to terms with some of her psychological issues, which will help her come to terms with her eating disorder. But I think it's everything. I think like it's not just she doesn't have this one conversation with her mom and then she comes to this realization. I think it's everything she's seen during the course of the movie. I think it's the interaction with Luke, the interaction watching the what happens with the pregnant woman in the house. I think it's everything coming to a point where finally it like breaks down her defenses, and finally this moment with her mom is enough to come to this realization and finally see what she is doing to herself.
Yeah, that's what should have happened. I just didn't feel like the movie communicated that properly.
Fair. That's fair. I've kind of spoiled the whole movie now.
Well, not really.
I think we were vague enough. Yeah.
I mean, she doesn't die. If that was ever a question, but
yeah. But I mean, I really did like it overall, and you're right. Maybe I am biased because I see Marty Noxon's name and I gonna like things. But I think there's a lot of like really interesting details about anorexia and eating disorders that I've never really thought of or knew before. Like the idea of her doing sit-ups obsessively, because it's not just that they aren't eating anything, it's that they're just obsessed with being as small as possible. So if they do allow themselves to eat something, like the one character like goes to the movies and eats popcorn and then sprints home because she has to burn off every single calorie.
Right.
The point where her sister is talking to her and she's being able to correctly like name how many calories is in something just by looking at it. There's all these like the hiding the throw up under the bed and stuff like that. There's all these little that just felt real to me. Like they felt like this is stuff that people suffering from this disorder actually do. And it was educational and interesting to really peer into this disorder in a way that I don't think a lot of people have really thought about before. Because I think a lot of people think of anorexia and bulimia and these kind of disorders, and it's just like, well, just eat. And it's so much more complicated than that. Like the part where they're talking about Emma Stone, I thought was so great because they're like, is she fat? And then Ellen, our main character, says she's got fat arms, and that fits her character because her character is obsessed with her arms being skinny. Like she's always wearing long sleeves. She's always trying to put her hand around her arm and make sure it's not getting too big. And it's just these like little moments of detail that you can tell that Noxon has injected into this from her own personal experience. Yeah,
I can see that. I can see how there are a lot of real things like that. I'm kind of surprised by your comment because I didn't notice that at all. And I think it's because I feel like I've been overexposed to characters with eating disorders in fiction. So none of that stuff really surprised me. But it was certainly like more of a realistic detail in this one based on all the stuff you've pointed out.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think a person that hasn't had the disorder could have written the movie like this movie is. But all right, so that's To the Bone. That's our second movie. So let's move on to our last movie and wrap this thing up. I think this is the one where I think we've been building to our levels of contention, Michael, because our last movie is Okja, the Bong Joon-ho movie. I think this was a full, like, Netflix financed this from the beginning, because this is a very expensive movie, because it has a CGI character in it throughout the entire time that is expensive. I think it cost $50 million to make this movie, which is a lot for a movie that's only going to come out to Netflix. But Bong Joon-ho is a director that I really enjoy. I really liked Snowpiercer, his movie that came out. God, how long ago was that? That's 4 years ago now. Wow.
Yeah, not too long ago. But yeah, that was a great movie. He
also did The Host and Mother, which are two movies I really like as well. He's just the type of director I enjoy. He's very kooky. His movies are very interesting and weird, with some really, really weird characters. Tilda Swinton doing some really crazy stuff in both Snowpiercer and this movie.
Yeah, almost Terry Gilliam-esque in some of the weird, bizarre aspects. Actually, now that you mentioned that.
Yeah, and whatever the hell Jake Gyllenhaal's doing in this movie, I think a lot of your like or dislike of this movie is based on if you can deal with what Jake Gyllenhaal's doing with his character, because it's kind of insane. So the summary of this movie is this company has created 26 super pigs that they've sent out to 26 different places around the world. They're supposed to raise them, and then at the end of 10 years, they will pick the best super pig and bring it to New York for a fabulous celebration. And of course, we follow Mija, who is a young South Korean woman who has been taking care of this pig named Okja. And of course, that pig wins and gets to go back to New York, and Mija doesn't want it to. So there's animal rights activists trying to stop this. There's the evil corporation and evil America, the idealistic South Koreans, and a lot of very anti-food processing stuff in here. There's a lot going on in this movie. And it's actually, I watched it again in preparation for this, because it had been a few months since I've seen it, and I just wanted it as fresh as possible. But there is a ton happening in this movie. It's trying to do a lot of things at the same time. What did you think?
Some would say too much.
some might say too much.
I just want to point out that you recommended this movie to me. And then I watched it, and I sort of texted you some of my reactions, and I think you were getting, like, genuinely upset.
Yes, I was
with some of my takeaways from the movie. But I didn't like the movie, and I think it kind of largely comes down to the fact that it doesn't go anywhere, and I feel like the protagonist is completely passive in the movie. Like, she's just watching everything happen and really plays no part in it until the end, and then the part she plays is doesn't really make sense.
See, I don't agree with you at all.
Can I spoil a few parts of this movie?
You can spoil a few parts. Spoilers for Okja.
Okay, so you start off, and Mija is taking care of Okja in their forest in Korea, I think, living with the grandpa, and she, like, takes a thorn out of Okja's foot, which is kind of like the height of her, like, ability to do anything to help Okja in this movie. And then Okja saves her from falling off a cliff, and then the people come, and she's kind of led away and distracted, and they abduct Okja. And then she goes after Okja, but really she's just following Okja's truck, and it's the Animal Rights Liberation Group that frees Okja, does all of the interactions with her and with Okja. And then, they leave, and then the company takes Okja. And it's just the animal rights group and the company kind of battling back and forth. Everyone's kind of using the girl. She still doesn't do anything. Fancy parade at the end. She doesn't do anything again to rescue Okja. It's the animal rights group. Stuff happens. They end up taking her to a slaughterhouse. And then the final like moment of the movie when it's like, oh, is Okja going to die? How is Mija going to save her? Is just the goddamn pig trade with the golden pig, which didn't even make any sense because it's like, oh, well, she have done this the whole time. And her grandpa bought the golden pig for her with like a portion of the money he got from raising Okja. So Okja is like definitely worth way more than this pig. And I even looked up the price of gold per ounce to confirm that. And even if that was like a normal pig with like pork meat, it would still be worth more money than that golden statue, which I know is like a logistical nitpick.
Yes.
But anyway, it doesn't change the point that Mija hasn't done anything throughout this whole movie to influence the plot at all, except that she's been used by other people. And then she buys Okja, and they just go back to live with the grandfather. So they're right back where they started. The grandfather, by the way, is the true villain of this movie.
I cannot. That is the biggest
but maybe
load
I'll
of
let
shit
you respond.
I've ever heard.
Maybe I'll let you respond to the active protagonist accusation before we get into the grandpa, because I want to talk about that at length.
Okay, so first of all, I mean, I agree that there's a lot happening to Mija that is out of her control, and I think that's very much the point of the movie, is how it's almost kind of a coming age tale of this girl learning, like, she lived in this idealistic, like, everything's perfect corner of the world that was hers, and it was just alone, and then she's introduced to this world that is completely out of her control, completely out of her power, and everyone is just crappy to everyone, and she is just all she wants to do the entire time. All she wants to do is just save her pig. That's all she wants, and everyone's using for her own gains. But she is doing stuff throughout the movie. I mean, there's a very specific 3-beat in this movie where she whispers into the ear of her pig to calm him down, and this happens 2 times.
She calms down the pig.
But this happens twice in the movie, and then the ending scene of the movie is like the pig whispering in her ear, and like it's like they have this symbiotic relationship where they're one and the same almost.
That's just like a device to show their relationship. It's not a thing that happens relative that's driving the plot, and that's what I'm talking about with the active protagonist. It's not that the movie doesn't do things.
But I think there's a difference between her actions doing something and her having actions. Like, you can say that her actions are not effective.
Yeah, her actions don't have a consequence.
But you can't. But that's not the same thing as not having an active protagonist.
I think that's the definition of not having an active protagonist. Like, they're just kind of going through motions, and the story is happening to them. They're not happening to the story.
But she is very specifically doing things throughout the story. I mean, the reason why Okja goes crazy and goes running down the stairs and goes running through the Korean mall is because Okja sees her and loses it. So if she wasn't there, that's just other characters reacting to. But it's because of her actions. It's because she was there. It's because she ran into a glass door at full speed and made it crash, and then ran through this office building, jumped on top of a moving truck, and talked to her pig that caused it to go on a rampage. That's action and reaction. That's what it is. So, I mean...
But none of that mattered, because the Animal Rights Liberation Group ended up like capturing Okja anyway, which is what they were going to do regardless of whether Mija was there.
Yes, right? But it exposed the company, and the company had to switch gears and attempt to use her in a different way.
But none of that. I don't think she did anything there. That's just like because of random coincidences with, like, you know, the animal going through the shop, and rampaging through the shop was like why all those things happened. It's not like Mija made any decisions here. She went after the pig to try to save the pig, but that was completely undermined by the fact that the Liberation Front ended up saving the pig, or not saving it, but, you know, taking it out of the truck and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like...
and that she even had no consequence once she was talking to the animal liberation people in the car, because of the whole Actually, like pretty cool scene where she says, "No, I'm not okay with this," but then the Korean translator Kay mistranslates for her to achieve the thing that he wants to happen, which is like, yeah, she's okay with it. And that just like further, to me, like removes her from having anything. Like, it doesn't even matter what she says. Like, no one can understand her in this whole movie because she's always being translated for. Like, and then when she goes to America and she's like speaking for the company and stuff, she's still being translated for. So they go out of their way to make it so that she has no power and she's completely inconsequential. And I get that that is on purpose, but I think that is always a mistake for the protagonist of any story.
I don't agree. I don't think her actions not working makes her an inactive protagonist. I don't think that's fair to say. I don't think it's fair to say that you are one person in a giant cog and the things you're doing have consequences, and they do have consequences. Her presence in this story is changing things. Yes, part of it is people are using her. Part of it is people are lying to her. But lying and dishonesty is one of the major themes of the movie. Like, everyone's lying to everyone, and it's terrible. And like,
she's just watching it all happen. Like, you don't get the kind of opinion that if she wasn't there, then really, like, anything would really be that different.
Okja would be dead. What do you mean nothing would be different? Okja would be dead. The company would have, like, I don't see how you can say that.
But is her one action then like trading the golden pig for Okja at the end?
I've already told you other actions she's done, but that is her most important action. Yes, that is her accomplishing her objective.
It's so unrelated to her story and the themes and everything. Like,
no, it's not.
Is the point that, like, just like capitalism is the answer? And if so, then doesn't that undermine her whole struggle? Because what she should have done in the capitalism mindset is just like right away be like, I'd like to make you an offer of this much money for this pig, which I believe is more than fair. And then they would be like, oh yes, that is a fair offer. Here is your pig back. Well, would that really have solved it? Because that cheapens like the whole movie.
No, that would not have solved it. The woman that was in charge would not have accepted that deal. Like, Tilda Swinton's Lucy Mirando character had this whole image of this false front of they're doing all this stuff for misdirection and nonsense, and it's only Nancy Mirando's character who is just the heartless, like openly heartless and perfectly capitalist and doesn't give a shit about anything, pragmatist that would just take a simple trade like that, because it's not even, the pig is property to her. It's less than money to her. So she accepts this trade. I think Mija's point, like Mija's goal, the entire movie has been to save Okja. So I don't think we even say, and you can say that the grandfather was maybe lying, and we'll get into that, but he said he tried to buy the pig back from that one point. They said no, because her whole stupid Super Pig contest was instrumental to her plan to make her company look good, even though underneath it all they were doing all these terrible, awful things.
Yeah. But the reason that changes ultimately isn't because she's like devised any plan that will make it able for her to buy the pig. It's just a bunch of coincidences that the old person gets replaced by a new person who's actually worse, but just happens to accept this golden pig trade.
I don't know. Coincidences. I mean, something happening by coincidence does not remove the action happening with the protagonist. She still did things that caused this to happen.
I think it does. I mean, if the whole movie is just a bunch of coincidences of things happening.
But it's not like the reason why Mirando is in terrible situation is because Mija rode the pig through a public place and exposed Mirando and what they were doing, and got the public on their side, on the side of this girl, and then they needed to do damage control, and they manipulated the girl into helping them do damage control.
But the public relations like didn't end up affecting anything. Like they didn't end up like bringing down the company or anything like that.
No,
it
but
was just kind of the people are going to be upset if we don't make up this other narrative, and then Mija's used as a part of that, and nothing changes in the world really as a part of this movie happening. She gets her pig back.
I mean, that's everything to her. Yes,
but she doesn't, like, what does she learn in the process? Like, what does she grow? Is there any action? Is like all the actions she takes, if you say she takes any actions, are just kind of like things that happen in the moment. Like, I guess I have this pig. I think you'll probably take this pig for this other pig. I'm going to give you this golden pig now.
So
that was easy.
If the protagonist doesn't have a complicated plan for how they're going to do stuff, then it doesn't count as action.
Well, that's one way, but it's just she's just a complete spectator to everything that was going on.
I mean, we've been talking about this one thing for 20 minutes, but you're completely wrong.
So let's move on to the grandfather.
Okay.
Who's the true villain of this movie.
I don't understand how you would ever think that, ever.
He's Judas. He's like literally Jews. Okja is Jesus, and the grandfather is Judas.
Why?
He sells out the pig. He betrays Mija and the pig and sells it for money, his own greed.
No, he does not sell the pig for money. He does not sell the pig for money. They entered into an arrangement 10 years ago. They would give him money if he looked after the pig. He tried to sell the pig back. They said no. All he did was lie to his daughter.
And then he gave up.
What is he supposed to do?
Okja was like a member of their family, right? Like, at least to Mija. Okja was like a big brother or something, right?
What is he supposed to do?
Well, imagine Okja was replaced by like her actual kid brother. And and he'd made this arrangement or whatever a long time ago. And people were going to come and take him away and kill him or whatever. Like, you'd be like, well, no, you're not just going to let that happen. You're going to like run away with them or something. Like, you don't just be like, oh, well, it's too late. I made the deal. I mean, but you're like, this is a person that's important to you.
But you changing it to a human being changes the entire film. It's a completely different movie now.
No, I get that no one else thought of it as like a sentient thing. But Mija did, because she grew up with it and knew who it was. And like, so should have her grandfather, right? Her grandfather also was there the whole time both of them were being raised.
Yeah, but Mija was a child who was not aware of how the world works. And her grandfather was. And her grandfather knew that
that's why he's evil.
But
because he knew and he let this happen anyway.
There was nothing he could do. The entire point of the movie is you can't stop this. The only thing you can do is take your little piece of it and protect your little piase of it. And
why didn't he protect his little piece of it?
How was he supposed to do that, Michael?
He's a terrible parent.
How was he supposed to do that? They
live in a massive fucking forest. Just like,
It has a tracing thing on it.
Tracing thing.
It has a tracing thing on its ear that's reporting stats all the time.
Just take the tracing thing out. I mean, like, how stupid are they? Like, they couldn't think of any way to like save.
Okay,
like, so wouldn't this be like wouldn't you agree this would be like, he would be a terrible person if this was a human?
Yes,
even
but it's not a human. It's not a human being. You completely change the story and say
he is a human being. That's the point. The point is that this animal is that animals are people too, basically, right?
The point to Mija,
the whole message of this movie, like, depending on how political you get with it, is kind of to like make you think about eating meat and the like meat butchering industry or whatever.
But to say that, I agree that he made mistakes and he did wrong things, and I agree that he fits into the theme of this movie about being deception and lies and betrayal, because everyone in this movie
betrayed them.
But to say that he's worse,
runs away from them and goes like, look, you are like, you've betrayed everything. You're dead to me. And then she goes after Okja, her true friend. And then at the end of the movie, she's just like, well, I guess we'll go back and live with my grandpa now. And like, he never apologizes or like ever seems to really realize how important Okja was to her.
I think he absolutely does realize that. I think you're putting words into the film. She did not say, you're dead to me forever and I leave you. She said, I'm going to go get my pig and bring it back here. That's what she's going to say. It's her grandfather. She's not going to just leave her grandfather because he lied to her once.
He was a dick.
That's not, you don't do, Michael, it's family. You don't do that to your family. Like, it's
but
just,
he wasn't even sorry. Like, he didn't even, like, clearly the most important person to her was Okja. And he never cared about that.
I don't understand how you look at his performance and say he wasn't sad about this whole thing, but he felt
powerless.
powerless.
Like a little sad, but he wasn't like, I'm going to help you get him back. This is wrong. We're going to get this thing back. He basically tried to talk her out of it the whole time.
Because he knew there was nothing he could do. There was nothing he could do.
Well, there was nothing that Mija could do, but then she did stuff. Or she tried to, but then did. Because she hasn't.
Well, wait, you just contradicted yourself.
Yeah, I know, right?
But
that's like a fine beginning, is like her going out to save the pig, but she just never, nothing she does ever does that. But she's trying, and the grandpa doesn't even try.
So that makes him the worst character in the story, worse than the evil corporation that's enslaving and murdering millions of these pigs.
I thought Miranda was a pretty good character. Did you not think so?
Lucy Miranda?
Yeah, Tilda Swinton.
Well, she plays both of them, but
okay. Well, the first one,
the better one. I thought she was an interesting character. I think she was a character striving to make herself look better.
Well, but I actually thought there was more to it. I thought she actually like wanted to do better too. Like, she thought she was doing a good thing. It's just that she wasn't thinking about it very hard.
I guess. Right? I think she was driven by the need to prove herself better than her father and her sister, and was willing to do whatever it took to do that, which is...
She's like the bad version. She's like the person who like does charity in order to make herself look better than other people.
Yeah, I get. I mean, but it's not like she's doing... I mean, she's still genetically engineering pigs, lying to the public, and slaughtering these things by the thousands. I mean,
she didn't know. She didn't know.
Yeah, she
a lot
did.
of the things that were happening.
Yeah, she did. Oh, yeah, that was all set up by her. All her sister just took over for it, and her sister didn't believe in putting up the happy image.
It sounded to me like that guy who was advising her was kind of like completely deceiving her the whole time.
Well, I mean, he kind of was. I think that's part of the betrayal theme that we see over and over again, is that he was really working for her sister the entire time, and was just maybe even using her in a way that she was using the super pigs, as just a front or a fancy hat or mask on this whole operation.
Another thing we disagree on is that I felt like the Animal Liberation Group were the good guys. They were like the true protagonists of this movie.
I think that Paul Dano's character was good. I think that the issue is they both use... Like, it's everyone... the thing is just everyone's using everyone for their own gains. And it's just, like...
Paul Dano actually, like, asks permission, technically.
Yeah, I mean, I think Paul Dano, out of everyone in his group, is the best one, because he is the most true to whatever code or creed he has, and is the most trying to actually do good and not hurt anything in the process. But I mean, what they do to that pig, what they let happen to that pig to expose what's going on, was terrible. And yes, he thought that he had her permission, but they still let it happen.
Yeah. Well, and they didn't know exactly what was going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, you have Lily Collins again, who's in this movie too, which is funny, but you have her say, "We knew that this was a possibility," and they let it happen anyway. So I don't know. I think they are definitely better than the Miranda Corporation, for sure. But I think this is showing how everyone kind of uses everyone. They
were also just the most interesting characters in general. I really liked Paul Dano's character, obviously.
I enjoyed them a lot.
He did a great job. He had a really kind of bizarre vision of like honor and stuff. Mm-hmm. I really liked Kay, who had a great arc of like telling a little lie at the beginning because of what he wanted to happen, but then like being sorry about it and redeeming himself in the end. I even liked the character who was completely unimportant, who just like refused to eat anything because because of the like carbon footprint or whatever.
He was really funny.
So that was a great group of characters, I felt, whereas Mija was barely a character.
Yeah, and it's funny because I the second time I watched it, I waited till the end of the credits, and there's actually a post-credit scene with Paul Dano getting out of prison, getting on a bus with Kay, and then the rest of them are there, and then they all put on ski masks because they're going to go do something else. So that's how the movie actually ends.
Oh, nice. I didn't see that.
Yeah, it's at the very end of the credits, it's a stinger. Yeah, so I mean, I like them a lot. I think there's a lot of very interesting characters. Like, it's crazy that we haven't even talked about Jake Gyllenhaal at all in this movie, who's just being insane. But I thought his character was really interesting too, because I thought, like, he's an example of what this corporate, like, lifestyle does to people. Because I think he at one point was probably a person who really did care about animals, and he was used in much the way they were trying to use Mija, until the point where he just became like a broken shell of a man who ends up torturing the poor pig.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think you might be being a little bit too generous with a backstory, a plausible backstory for him that they didn't explore too much in the movie, but you can kind of imagine, just because Jake Gyllenhaal does a pretty good job with the character.
I mean, there's a lot of hints though. There's like the fact that his ratings were tanking, and no one seemed to care about him anymore. Like, there's the beat where he's like, oh, people in Korea still like me, like they're kind of done with me over there, and like, so he takes this role as like the face of a corporation because he's desperate to be noticed and to be liked still. And I love his announcer voice versus his regular, like, it's such a crazy, unhinged, wonderful. I love Jake Gyllenhaal. He's so great.
Yeah. He should have won the best acting award for Nightcrawler.
I agree. This almost seems like Nightcrawler on steroids. Like, his character here is just like,
really? I think it's completely different. I think this one is way more bizarre, whereas the one in Nightcrawler was like hyper realistic.
He was an actual sociopath in Nightcrawler. So
yeah, I didn't really buy his character in this one as a real character, but it was a great caricature, which was what a lot of the characters kind of were here. Yeah,
well, I mean, that's kind of Bong Joon-ho's thing. Like, I don't know if you remember Snowpiercer. Tilda Swinton's character in that movie is kind of a caricature too.
Also a character, which is a perfectly valid and delightful style when done properly, like in all of those movies.
Yeah. All right. Well, I don't know if we have much else to yell at each other over this movie. Obviously, we have very differing opinions, but I think that was a good conversation at least.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I would bring up is just the ending. Is just I feel like the movie was essentially, maybe should have been a comedy, and all the struggles in the movie should have led to some celebration or something at the end. But instead of that, it's just kind of a sad realization that the world sucks, and it felt more like it was kind of trying to be heavier than it deserved to be at the end, and it didn't really work for that reason. It's like, it's important that you take this message really seriously, so we're going to have a really kind of dire ending to it.
But see, I think that's what Bong Joon-ho does so well, though, because he always has these kind of kooky comedy elements in his movie, but then they always end up being serious explorations of something, of some aspect of humanity. I mean, Snowpiercer was this very weird, kind of funny movie that had this undercurrent.
Snowpiercer was more of a tragedy, though.
I mean, you don't see this as a tragedy?
No, because in Snowpiercer, and it's been a while since I've seen that movie, but the main character kind of has this journey that's both physical through the train and sort of internal, and then in the end he sacrifices his hand, is it, in order to at like a crucial turning point in his character, and what happened, and you kind of know the whole time that he's marching toward this sacrifice, whereas here there's no sacrifice, there's no, like, there's really, I mean, it seemed like there was only one way this movie could end, because it's about a child's journey to reclaim her best friend. So either she saves her friend, and that's great, and it's a great victory against like the evil man. Or her friend dies, and you're going for like Newbery award-winning children's book where kid's best friend dies and it sucks. And neither of those things happened. It was more just everyone realized the world sucked, and then everyone just seemed kind of sad.
Yeah, I guess I think when you see the pig take the electric shock to push its baby under the fence, so they take the baby with it because he's just
super sad.
I mean, that's tragic. That's like it's
tragic, but it's not a part of the narrative of the story. Like those pigs weren't there earlier in the story.
Yeah,
so just like one sad thing happening doesn't make it the dramatic structure of a tragedy.
I guess, yeah. But I mean, I think it ends hopeful. I mean, like
that's it.
Well, I mean, she has her pig. They have the baby pig. It's like a baby represents hope for the future. Like, so, I mean, the world is not fixed. There's still horrible people going to do horrible things to each other. But just like in I Don't Feel Home in This World Anymore, she's like in her corner of the world has found contentment with her pig.
See, I didn't even see that. Like, it didn't even seem like she was that happy at the end.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
It just seemed like they'd gone back to their life with her abusive grandfather.
Oh my God.
And were never appreciated or loved.
Oh, Jesus Christ. That's so depressing.
I know, right?
That's not what the end of the movie was at all.
Look, I just can't get over this grandfather.
All right. Well, let's wrap this up then. There's a bunch of more movies and TV shows on Netflix we could have talked about, but we figured 3 was enough for one episode. So we should, every time we're out of movies to talk about, we should go back and argue about some Netflix stuff because there's so much of it.
Yeah. Sounds good. I enjoy watching them. Yeah.
All right. So before we go, Michael, why don't you tell me what you've been watching besides Netflix stuff? Actually, I shouldn't have said that because what you've been watching.
More Netflix stuff. I watched a series on Netflix. It's not a Netflix series. I think it's actually a CW series, which I know isn't a good omen for it. But it's
half
called
the stuff I watch is CW. So I love CW.
The Magicians. And it suffers from a lot of things that I feel most CW shows suffer from, because they're all kind of targeted at teenagers. And what I don't like,
actually a sci-fi show, sir.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, it is a sci-fi show, but it's basically a CW show. It's a bunch of angsty teenagers, kind of, and melodramatic relationships between teenage characters and stuff like that. But the thing that I really liked about The Magicians was kind of that it explored this completely new, like, niche conflict, which is you have this main character who's obsessed with fantasy his whole life, and then he finds out this fantasy world's real, and he gets invited to a school there, much like Hogwarts, and he has this friend in real life who was also like that as a kid, but then when she grew up, she kind of became more of a realist. But they both end up going to sort of the auditions for this school, and he makes it in because he's a true believer, basically, and she doesn't because she became impure, basically. This is a metaphorical sort of context behind it. But the great part is her struggle with, like, now that she knows it's real, how can she keep on living and not be a part of that? And the movie, the series does a really great job of exploring that, and the actress does a really great job of starting off as this really, like, good friend to the main character, and level-headed and, like, realistic, and, like, still likes the fantasy, but it's like, yeah, we got to grow up. And then, like, kind of has this great arc of kind of, like, degenerating into, like, desperately trying to get back to this world, because how can she live in the real world when she knows this other fantasy one exists that she just assumed she would never be able to obtain and thus gave up on. So I don't know if I've done a
cool.
good job of describing that conflict, but it's a cool exploration of a very realistic human response to this scenario that, hasn't been done to death. And they do a good job of it. But I feel like later on, the series kind of degenerates into a bunch of sort of melodramatic, everyone's sleeping with each other sort of thing.
Those stories are okay. They can be good.
Yeah, they can be good, but it stops focusing on the parts that I thought were interesting, and then is just like, well, we don't have enough teenagers watching, so we need to have some like love triangles and stuff.
I gotcha. Okay. Well, I bought the first book because it's a book series as well. I bought the first book. I just haven't had time to read it yet. Maybe I'll check out
the Magicians.
Yeah.
Oh God, I really hated the book.
Oh really?
Yeah. So Daniel told me to read it a while ago. He's like, "Oh, this is a great book," but it kind of, and I've blocked out a lot of it because it was so traumatic for me. But I didn't finish it because it was too resonant and soul crushing.
Huh.
So we'll see what your response to it is.
Yeah, I got to get around to. I have so many books. I'm looking at my stack of books right now, and it's continually growing larger. But it's on there.
Excellent.
All right. The thing I wanted to talk about is Richard Linklater's Before trilogy, because there's a Criterion Collection sale going on right now, or I think it's over now, but it was going on for the entire month of July. That was 50% off all Criterion. So they had the entire Before series trilogy 50% off. So I finally got that. And I hadn't seen any of these movies, and I watched them all like in a week's time. And I absolutely love them. They tell the story of this couple that meets on a train in, I think they're in France, or I think they stop in Vienna, but they're on their way back to Paris. And they just meet on the train, and he asks her to get off with him, and they spend the night in Vienna. And then at the end of it, they pledge to meet up again in 6 months. And then the second movie fast forwards 9 years when they run into each other again. The third movie fast forward another 8 or 7 years or something. And this is real time. So it's literally like this amount of time has happened. So you see the actor's age as the character's age. And it's just this really wonderful examination of a relationship. Of the first one's just this wonderful picture of just meeting a person and like having this instant connection with this person, and then knowing it's only temporary. And then they kind of carry that forward from there. But it's wonderful. Like Richard Linklater, he's one of my favorite directors. The way he crafts his films, that make them feel so real and relatable to me. I know Matt does not like his films, so I told him to watch this trilogy and then tell me if he still doesn't like Richard Linklater, and if he does, he's a monster. So hopefully he'll get around to doing that.
I didn't realize that this was a trick that Linklater had used before, pre-Boyhood, was to make 3 movies in kind of real time where people were aging. I don't think he set out to do it. I think he made this first movie, and then 9 years later, he and Ethan Hawke, and I forget who played the woman in the movie, wanted to get together again and write a new story. And so they did that. Yeah. And then 8 years after that, they did it again. So I don't think it was planned. I think it just kind of happened. Well, it seems like maybe he made this first trilogy of movies. Did he finish the trilogy before Boyhood, or?
I think so, because I think the last one came out in 2012.
Because maybe that kind of happened, and he's like, I think I have an idea of how I can do even more with this by watching like a child grow up and all of the things that. So Before Midnight came out in 2013. Boyhood came out in 2014. I don't know. Let me look it up. Yeah. Oh, maybe around the same time then.
Boyhood came out in 2014. So
he was working on them concurrently then, I guess.
Well, I mean, because the way Boyhood worked is that they filmed like for a month every year. So yeah, he was doing other stuff. So okay. I mean, I bet the idea. Let me before.
So what else has he done besides Boyhood and this trilogy?
Dazed and Confused. Why am I blanking on other stuff? He had Everybody Wants Some, a movie that came out last year. He did Slacker. He's done a lot of things.
I think I might agree with Matt.
Have you seen any of those films, or are you just being a jerk?
I've seen Dazed and Confused, I think.
Excellent film.
Is that the one with Clooney?
No.
No, that's up in the air. What's Dazed and Confused?
Dazed and Confused is the high school, like the high school burnouts movie. It's Matthew McConaughey's first role ever.
Oh, I'm not sure I have seen that.
It's very good.
Yeah. I mean, I like Boyhood okay, but...
Boyhood was not my favorite of his movies. These are now my favorite of his movies, by the way.
These are, okay, maybe I'll check him out.
If you don't like the first one, don't bother going on, but I absolutely adored it. It's a lot of very fast and interesting dialogue between the two characters, because it's just really just the two of them as they just kind of hang out over one night in Vienna.
I'm a little bit skeptical because it seems like it's super realistic and subdued in the kind of way that maybe is why I didn't like several of the movies you're talking about today. But movies that are realistic to the point of where they acknowledge that like everything is meaningless just kind of bum me out.
I wouldn't say that's I would not say that those are these movies. I think these are just really accurate inspections of what a relationship is, what romance is, what love is, especially for two characters that just happen to meet and then kind of they meet by chance, spend one night together, and it changes the course of their lives. And it's really interesting and cool.
Oh, that doesn't sound that interesting. But I believe you.
Okay. All right. Well, let's wrap this thing up. Next week on the podcast, Matt will be back. We're going to talk about The Adventure Zone, which is a Dungeons and Dragons podcast that is wrapping up on Thursday. This coming Thursday, I think they're going to have their final episode. So I got Matt addicted to this podcast. And we're going to come here and talk about it because I think this thing does things with stories and storytelling that has really never been done before. It's a very unique, kind of different way of telling a story to an audience. So I think we're going to have a lot of fun conversation with that. And then the week after that, Michael, you will be back because we're bringing back the Kryptonian collection.
Oh, yes. And I've proposed a movie. Yeah,
so we're going to be debating 12 Monkeys and seeing if that is worthy of entering the collection. So
I'm confident it will be.
Well, Matt says you picked a movie that just so happened to be one of his favorite movies. So
so it's one of my favorite movies.
I'm very excited about that. That's a podcast series we did and then kind of dropped off as we got busy, but we're bringing it back now. We're going to start doing it every month. So we're going to have Daniel, Matt's brother, on as another council member, and Michael will be the challenger putting forth 12 Monkeys. So look for that at the end of August. But Michael, thanks for coming on and debating these movies with me. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And all right, you can find this, all the other podcasts we do and more at dailyplanetfilms.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at Daily Planet Films. If you have any questions, recommendations, episode ideas, or whatever, you can send them to us at dailyplanetfilms@gmail.com. And if you like what we do here and want to donate some money to help us do it, we do have a Patreon account. That's patreon.com/dailyplanetfilms. It's DALY. That's it for us this week. And we'll see you guys next week.
The podcast is over. It's done. We hope you all had some fun. Go back to your work or your school. Maybe the gym. Hey, that's cool. Regardless, just go away. But please come back next Friday.